Okay, I think we're going to get started. Welcome to the pre-application webinar for the Center for Coordination of Analysis, Science, Enhancement, and Logistics in Tobacco Regulatory Science, or CASEL as we like to refer to it. Next slide, please. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get into the webinar presentations. If you are having technical difficulties, please use the chat option at the bottom of your screen to send a message to technical support for direct assistance. Next slide, please. You can view live closed caption by clicking the closed caption icon, also found at the bottom of the screen. Next slide, please. And we're asking that you use the chat option for sending questions to the panelists. So there's a TRISP send questions here in the chat, and do so, and we will entertain all of the questions at the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. We are recording this webinar, so if you have colleagues who are missing it today, it will be on the TRISP website in a couple of, hopefully less than 2 weeks, hopefully a couple of days, as will the slides from the presentations. Next slide, please. So I'm Helen Meissner. I'm Director of the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program. Next slide, please. If you are not familiar with our group, we coordinate the partnership with the FDA Center for Tobacco Products and the NIH institutes that participate in tobacco research. We have oversight responsibility for all of the trans NIH activities, including issuing the funding opportunities like this one for CASEL, grantee meetings, and also webinars like the one you're participating in. All the research supported through the TRISP program must be responsive to the Center for Tobacco Products. I do always like to mention that TRISP represents an addition to the NIH Tobacco Research Program. So NIH continues to support tobacco research that is not in the realm of tobacco regulatory science, and will continue to do so. Next slide, please. We have a website that you may want to check back on occasionally, describing the program. You also can see links to all of the research that we have funded to date. There are frequently asked question documents you may want to refer to, current funding opportunities, and much more. Next slide, please. So I'm guessing that most of you are aware of some of the companion funding opportunities that are also coming out of the program right now. There is the Tobacco Centers of Regulatory Science, or TCORs. We had held a webinar for that earlier this afternoon. There's also the RFA for new Center for Rapid Surveillance of Tobacco. A few things I just want to note related to this is that for CASEL PIs or other members of the CASEL awardee team, that group of investigators cannot serve as PI or key personnel on either the TCORs or the CREST RFAs. Next slide, please. So today's agenda is here in front of you. We will start with Dana Van Bemmel from the Center for Tobacco Products, followed by Heather Kimmel of NIDA, who will go over the content of the RFA and your application. We'll then hear from Lauren Fortas from the Center for Scientific Review, And then from Amy Buckheimer at NIDA regarding grants management issues related to these grants. Next slide, please. So I am now going to turn it over to Dana Van Bemmel.
Great. Thank you, Helen. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dana Van Bemmel. I'm the Chief of the Research Operations and Advisory Resources Branch at FDA's Center for Tobacco Products here in the Office of Science. Next slide, please. I'd like to just take a little bit of time today, 10 minutes or so, to talk to you about the Center for Tobacco Products, our public health goals, some of our strategic priorities, and then really briefly give a high-level overview of our CTP-funded research portfolio. So to start, let's touch on CTP's public health goals. The Center for Tobacco Products' primary goal is to reduce the harm from tobacco products across the entire population. This includes reducing the number of people who start using tobacco products, encouraging those individuals who are currently using tobacco products to stop using them, and to reduce the adverse health impacts for those who continue to use tobacco products. Now, I know this slide may be familiar to many of you, but it felt like a good idea just to take a moment to touch on it and remind us. Could you hit the next slide, please? I'm sorry. And remind us not just of the public health goals of the Center for Tobacco Products, but how we got here and what it means to regulate tobacco products. So the Center for Tobacco Products has had the authority to regulate tobacco products since 2009. It gave the FDA the immediate authority to regulate cigarettes, cigarette tobacco, and roll your own tobacco products, and smokeless tobacco products. And then in 2016, FDA finalized what's commonly known as the deeming rule, and this brought all products all products meeting the statutory definition of a tobacco product within our regulatory authorities. So probably most notably, this brought electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS, under our regulatory authorities. So that includes e-cigarettes, e-cigars, vape pens. But it also brought products including all cigars, pipe tobacco, nicotine gels, water pipe or hookah products, and any future tobacco products under our regulatory authorities. I just want to take a moment. This slide deck was created and cleared before this became final, but just late last week on the 15th of March, President Biden signed a spending bill that expanded the definition of an FDA-regulated tobacco product. So as a result, it gives the Food and Drug Administration, or the FD&C Act, now will include specific language that makes clear that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration can soon regulate tobacco products containing nicotine from any source. And this will include synthetic nicotine. So in the spirit of future tobacco products and expanding that definition, this is hot off the press information. If you'd like more information about the regulatory scope or the specific expansion of the definition of a FDA regulated tobacco product, you can find that information on our website. Next slide, please. CTP has a number of key strategic priorities. If you would like details on these strategic priorities, again, I would invite you to visit our website. But just to give you a sense of the types of activities that CTP takes on, has under its regulatory authorities, the kinds of work that we're doing here day to day. That includes product standard activities. So the Center for Tobacco Products has the ability to set product standards related to tobacco products. We have a number of different activities and pathways for tobacco product reviews, or for products to come in for either pre-market applications or modified risk authorizations, and then a number of post-market activities that happen after a product might be authorized. And again, I don't have time in 10 minutes to go into detail, but please note that there are a number of pathways in which a product can come in, a tobacco product can come in for CTP review. It also includes our compliance and enforcement activities. We have an entire office dedicated to just compliance and enforcement to ensure that industry is complying with the federal tobacco laws. And then finally, we have an office also related to public education and health communications. This office, since 2014, has been very active in launching various education campaigns targeted at discrete audiences. These include things such as the Real Cost campaign, which was targeted at tobacco products and teens, the Real Cost of Smokeless, which is a campaign related to rural teens and using smokeless in the United States. And then soon to be released, there'll be a education campaign known that was called The Next Legends. This is a campaign directed at American Indian and Alaska Native youth aged 13 to 17 and communicating the risks associated with e-cigarettes. So this is just to touch on some of the activities within the Center for Tobacco Products and to give you a sense of the types of research that we fund and that's funded through other sources. As Helen mentioned, there's other research in tobacco science funded by the FDA, all of which collectively can inform our regulatory activities. Next slide, please. The Center for Tobacco Products has 8 research priority areas outlined, again, publicly. This is available on our website. Variations of this are available and outlined in current funding opportunities, specifically those with the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program that Helen mentioned earlier. Again, I don't have time to dive deep into each one of these, but just to give you a sense that there are research priorities that span a large breadth of research, including research in populations, all the way across to what we would consider bench science, or research on what's in the product itself, the chemistry or the components, constituents of the product itself. So very wide-ranging research areas and interests. Next slide, please. In order to facilitate those types of research activities and review, the Office of Science employs a broad range of scientists with a large range of expertise. So this includes scientists in what we call product science, scientists who work in population sciences such as epidemiology and social science. We have scientists working in non-clinical science, including toxicology, biology, environmental science. And then the health sciences disciplines, which include medicine, neuroscience, clinical pharmacology, those types of disciplines. But again, a broad-ranging science. So I've used the word science about 4 different times in the last 20 seconds, and probably that just hammers home this idea that it's science that drives everything that we do here at the Center for Tobacco Products. The evidence base, whether it's generated by CTP-funded research or other research in the field, that evidence base is critical to our ability to review product applications, to make decisions and develop things such as product standards. So it's really underlying everything we do here at the Center for Tobacco Products. Unlike some other centers at FDA, the Center for Tobacco Products doesn't have its own laboratories. So the research that we do is led by our scientists. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. And next slide again. So sorry, we can go back. Can we go back one more, Tanya? Just to say that this slide was meant to depict what I was speaking over, and I apologize for not advancing the slides, but this idea that science underlines everything that we do here at the Center for Tobacco Products. Next slide, please. So again, I was saying that the Center for Tobacco Products is different than other centers here at the FDA. We don't have our own laboratories to do our own research. So we rely on collaborations either with other federal agencies or through partnerships formally through federal contracts or other interagency activities and other non-HHS or non-health and human services organizations that have a particular expertise in the research that we expertise in the research that we're interested in doing. Specifically, before I go to the next slide, I just want to take a minute to note the research activities and collaborations that we have with NIH, or the National Institutes of Health. Helen touched on the program, the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program, where CTP provides funds for NIH to award grants that are specific to tobacco regulatory science and support our regulatory activities. In addition to that strong partnership, we have a partnership with NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse. That partnership funds the longitudinal cohort study known as the PATH study, or the Population Assessment of Tobacco and Health. This longitudinal study is designed to look at tobacco use behaviors and related to both users and non-users of tobacco. So it's a strong partnership, and it's an acronym PATH that you're going to see on the next slide. So next slide, please, Tanya. This pie chart is meant to just give you a sense of the types of research that we fund here at the Center for Tobacco Products. And I fully acknowledge in looking at this slide again this morning that we have used some labels that probably mean more to those of us internally than they do to those outside of CTP. But let me just take a second to note that the largest piece of the pie here is noted as the IDDA, the Interdepartmental Delegation of Authority. That's the partnership that we have with the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program, or TRIST. So it's the CTP funded grants through NIH, including the funding opportunity announcement for the webinar that we're here for today. Other areas of research include contract mechanisms noted there in the dark blue, interagencies activities that are both related to that longitudinal cohort study PASS that I mentioned or not related to PASS, and then performance agreements, which are really internal interagency activities. So work that we do with our sister partners, sister centers here at FDA. Next slide, please. We have these various collaborations and mechanisms to do research, and the research that we fund covers all of the research domains that we discussed earlier. So we have research in all 8 research areas of interest. A companion slide that I didn't include in this talk would include research by all of the tobacco products that we regulate. So we have research in nearly every tobacco product that we are currently regulating. So wide-ranging in research domains and areas and by products regulated. Next slide, please. I just wanted to take a moment to note that since the beginning of this CTP-funded portfolio in 2010, CTP-funded research has published more than 1,500 publications and been cited in more than 15,000 unique publications. So it really has been a far-reaching program. It's exciting to see how the program has grown since 2010 from just a handful of projects to more than 200 active research projects in our currently funded CTP research portfolio. Next slide, please. So then just to tie the CTP Tobacco Regulatory Science portfolio back to this funding opportunity announcement. Next slide, please. The overall objective of CASEL is to support a research program that can inform FDA's regulatory activities. And that includes a coordinating center that has the scientific ability and coordination to coordinate all of CTP funded research. So not just the funded research through the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program with NIH, but all of the different types of CTP funded research. Our hope is that the coordinating center will provide leadership in fostering excellence in tobacco regulatory science, and that it will have the ability to support career enhancement efforts. So I'm just going to leave it right there with that and pass it on to the next speaker, who's going to dive a little more into the details of the CASEL funding opportunity. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Dana. Now we'll be hearing from Heather Kimmel at NIDA about the specifics in the RFA. So Heather, it's all yours.
Hi there. It's great to talk with everybody this afternoon. My name is Heather Kimmel, and I am a program official at NIDA, the scientific point of contact for this RFA. I'm also the director of the PATH study at NIH. So Dana was talking about the PATH study earlier. So I also have that role at NIDA. And I wanted to point out on this slide, the NIDA TRS program at nida.nih.gov email is the place that you should direct all of your questions about the RFA. We have a fantastic team in NIDA. They're ready to respond to questions. And this is the best way to get a hold of the full team rather than emailing me directly. Next slide, please. Very briefly, CASEL has 4 main activities. Dana touched on this earlier, and these are all related to the CTP-funded Tobacco Regulatory Science Research Program. So the first main activity is to coordinate the scientific activities between all the projects. The second is to synthesize the data and the scientific findings from these projects. The third is to facilitate career development of trainees and scientists in the field of tobacco regulatory science, and then also to disseminate research results. I also want to point out that this would be our 3rd iteration of this coordinating center, which was initially funded in 2013 under the name Sector, and then again in 2018 under the same name, CASEL. And this is a U54 cooperative agreement mechanism, which means that there's significant federal oversight of the project, and this is very important to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So this RFA has 4 required components, which I'll discuss momentarily, as well as potential optional core. So let's go ahead and talk about the first component. Next slide. So the first core is the leadership and logistics core, which will perform 2 main activities. The first is the leadership, coordination, and support activities, and that itself includes coordinating scientific meetings, managing a website, as well as managing the steering committees for both CASEL itself and for the TCORE. In addition to supporting the TCORE steering committee, the CASEL will also coordinate several scientific working groups around priority topics identified by the steering committee and the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program. Next slide, please. So the second core is the analysis of rapid response core. And the goal of this core is to provide a synthesis of current research and identify research needs and opportunities for collaboration across the Tobacco Regulatory and Science Program. Another goal is to organize time-sensitive projects via the New Opportunity Fund, which I'll get to in a moment. And then the third goal is to harmonize measures across studies. Now, in this FRA, we've actually made changes to the rapid response program. So let's go to the next slide and I'll explain that a bit more. Thank you. So instead of each TCORE's program taking the responsibility of the rapid response project individually, program by program, what we've done is we've moved this activity to CASEL in this version of the RFA. So that means that CASEL will now act as the organizational hub for opportunity fund to support these rapid response projects across all of the TCORE. And in doing that, CASEL will provide both the administrative structure for these projects, and they will also set aside $1.5 million in direct costs each year for this research program. Next slide. Now I'm going back to the core. So the third core is the career enhancement core. And this core is focused on career development training across all the career stages representing the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program. So each TCORE has a career enhancement component within the project. And this core within CASEL facilitates the collaboration across all of these components from project to project, as well as creating networks across the full Tobacco Regulatory Science Program. And this core also provides leadership and continuing education. And this can involve online modules, live webinars, and training sessions and meetings and conferences and other activities. So let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the dissemination core is charged with consolidating the data and disseminating innovative products through collaborative peer-reviewed publications and scientific reports, as well as presentations at workshops and meetings and seminars. This can be at the national level. This can be, within the project itself. In addition, this core will also maintain a website repository as a resource for the Tobacco Regulatory and Science Program investigators, including a bibliography and grantee publication and tobacco regulatory science information. So Dana talked today about some of the new regulations that came out last week, and this would be a resource where you can find that information and be very up to date. Okay, next slide, please. So Dana touched on the FDA CTP research activities, and as she noted, there are 8 priorities here, and most of these have been a hallmark of the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program since its inception. One change that some of you that may have been involved with CASEL, either directly or indirectly, might notice is that the former economics and policy area is now called impact analysis, which is the last one in the slide. Next slide, please. So what projects are under CASEL purview? So the priority for CASEL is to provide coordination support for the Tobacco Centers of Regulatory Science or the TCORE's project, as well as convening scientific meetings among the TCORE's grantees and or all CTP-funded research. However, to a lesser extent, it's still incredibly important. CASEL will also provide coordination for the other grants funded under the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program portfolio, as well as research supported by CDC, other FDA centers, and research contract organizations. So thinking about that slide that Dana showed with all the other projects that are going on, so CASEL will also help provide coordination for those projects. Let's go to the next slide. So here we'll talk about eligible applicants. So institutions and individuals currently receiving CTP or related NIH grant or contract funding are eligible to apply. So you can apply. However, you must request funding for new activities. Now, foreign institutions are not eligible to apply, but foreign components to the budget are allowed. Now, one really important thing to note is that we do absolutely recognize the overlap in expertise and interests, particularly within the tobacco regulatory science community. However, the key personnel of the CASEL awardee team cannot include key personnel from the research team of a Tobacco Center for Regulatory Science awardee or the Center for Rapid Surveillance of Tobacco. And I know Helen mentioned that earlier, but it bears repeating again just to make sure everybody understands. Next slide, please. So letter of intent is not required for this RFA, but it's really strongly recommended that you do this before you submit an application. And this is due to the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program mailbox by May 15th. And it needs to contain the 5 elements listed on the screen, which includes the title of the activity, the names of institutions and contact information for the PRs, as well as the key personnel, the number and title of this funding opportunity, so we know what you're talking about here. And the last point here is we highly recommend that you include a specific name so that our team can provide constructive feedback in terms of responsiveness of this application. I do want to point out that this mailbox for the LORs is different than a mailbox where you just send questions. I want to make sure that you know there are actually 2 different email addresses. Okay, next slide. So the FAQs we have available on the Tobacco Regulatory Science Program website. So please feel free to check those out. These are updated periodically depending on the questions we get from you all in the research community. Just feel free to go back and check those out every now and then. Next slide, please. So it's been a pleasure to talk with you about this exciting RFA today. So don't hesitate to check out our resources and send us an email if you have additional questions. Again, the email at the bottom of the slide here is the best one for you to use for questions. But again, remember that's a different email than the one for the other ads. So thank you very much for your time today. And I'm going to hand you over to Lauren Fordyce to talk a bit about the review process for these applications. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. And now we'll hear from the Center for Scientific Review.
Good afternoon. I'm Lauren Fordyce. I am a Scientific Review Officer in the Center for Scientific Review. We review about 75% of the applications at the NIH. And so I'm just going to go over sort of a few brief things that are covered in the funding opportunity announcement, but I just want to sort of draw your attention to them so you can be aware of them in preparing your applications. Next slide, please. So it's important to remember the key dates for application review, which are spelled out explicitly in the FOA. The applications are due July 14th. Then they will go up for review in January. And then that's the first stage of review because NIH uses 2 stages. And then they'll go to the advisory council review, depending on the institute they are assigned up to. And that will happen in May 2023. It is important to note that according to this RFA, no late applications will be accepted. So everything needs to be submitted by July 14th. Next slide. Additionally, no changes can be made after the submission. So if you skip something, you miss something, something needs to be updated, we cannot make those changes after they have been submitted. There are a few types of materials that can be submitted under NIH's post-submission material policy, and I've linked the notice there. But you will receive information about that from the scientific review officer assigned to the meeting. They will go through all the items that can be submitted and include directions on how to do that. So what's important to note is that for these limited type of materials, reviewers are not obligated to read these. So just wanted to point that out. Next slide. So the mission of CSR is to ensure that all applications receive a fair, independent, expert, and timely review free from inappropriate influences. And it's important to point that out because a big part of that is policing sort of conflicts of interest. So we work very, very hard to make efforts to avoid any or real or perceived conflict. So even the appearance of conflict as defined by NIH policy. And we have what we call two kinds of conflicts. We have out of meeting conflicts and out of room conflicts. Out of meeting conflicts are the individuals who be excluded from even participating in the review meeting. So this means anyone involved in or listed as involved personnel on any of the applications. So you can imagine that's going to be a long list of people given the complexity of these projects. Additionally, this is people from the tobacco industry. Next slide, please. We also have out of room conflicts. So those are people who may know people that are listed on the applications. They could be a collaborator or a former collaborator within the past 3 years, a mentor or a mentee, or anyone from an institution listed on that application. So sometimes I can even include letters of support or small pieces of the application, but just keep that in mind when you're thinking about the expertise that's brought in to review these applications. Conflicts of interest are probably the biggest part of our job in the front end of this process to make sure that we have the strongest reviewers, but who have no appearance of conflict with anyone on any of these applications. Next slide. So this is hard to see, and I realize that, but I just took a screenshot of the funding opportunity announcement, and this is section 5. So I just wanted to draw your attention to this section, because everything I'm going to show you on the next few slides is written explicitly in this section. You can see here that we use the typical review criteria that we would use for any NIH application. We have our overall impact, and then we have our 5 main criteria: the significance, investigators, innovation, approach, and the environment. And within those sections, you can see there are questions specific to this funding opportunity announcement. I've highlighted one there. So I just want to draw your attention to that, because you'll need to make sure that your application addresses these questions, because reviewers are going to look and evaluate your application based on these questions. Next slide. So here it is a little larger. You can see underneath in the significance, there's specific questions related to the CASEL, FOA, and additionally under innovation. So just take a look at that in section 5. Next slide, please. Additionally, the CASEL has some additional review criteria. So these sections will not get individual scores like the main review criteria do, but they are considered scoreable in the sense that they can be considered and weighted within the overall impact score of the application. So next slide, please. So these are the cores, the leadership and logistics core, analytics and rapid response core, the career enhancement core, and the dissemination core. And again, those are spelled out very clearly in the review criteria. Next slide, please. And then finally, we also have our standard additional review criteria, which are also sort of weighted in the overall impact score. These are the things that would be standard on any NIH application, an RON application. And R21s and the like. So human subjects, the inclusion of women, minorities, individuals across the lifespan, vertebrate animals, biohazards, resource sharing plans, authentication of key biological and chemical resources. Next slide, please. So thank you. Again, I just wanted to draw your attention to section 5. You probably can find anything you need to know about the application review in that section.
Thank you, Lauren. We will now hear from Amy Buckheimer on the administrative and budgetary requirements for this FOA. Amy?
Hello, I'm glad to be here to be able to discuss a few of the administrative points from the RFA. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. The NIH, via support from FDA or CTP, intends to fund approximately 1 application. Total costs up to $3.8 million for FY23. As with any grant or cooperative agreement, future year total costs do depend upon the availability of funds. Applicants can request up to 4, rather, I'm sorry, I was speaking about TCORs earlier, 5 years for a project period. I'm not sure if this was mentioned prior. Non-domestic entities are not eligible to apply. However, foreign components are allowable. Could I have the next slide? There are some dates I'd like to call attention to. If submitting a letter of intent, it would be due May 15th, 2022. Ultimately, the application due date is July 14th. The earliest possible date we would start this grant or cooperative agreement would be September 2023. Each of the, the one NOA that is funded will include a special term. It will detail how to submit it. It would be a 6-month mid-period progress report is what we call it. But again, the term on the award would describe how to submit it, who to submit it to, et cetera. Next slide, please. The funding mechanism that would be used would be a U54 mechanism for a cooperative agreement. These do not allow automatic carryover authority. Instead, a prior approval request would need to be submitted with a bona fide need. They're designated as non-SNAP. Again, that's just referring to not having the automatic carryover authority. If an application is submitted for funding, future progress reports will be due 60 days prior to the cycle start date. Next slide, please. CASEL will include some unique components, as Heather was detailing earlier. One of these components is the Analysis and Rapid Response Core. It's an opportunity fund to support time-sensitive projects, the rapid response projects. The CASEL recipient is expected to set aside $1.5 million of its direct costs annually to support this project, which would be subawards. And the CASEL recipient would be entrusted per NIH policy, of course, to handle all post-award management of the subawards unless a change in scope would result. Next slide. And that's it for me. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me or give me a call.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks.
So we will now move to the Q&A portion of our webinar. So again, please submit your questions through the chat. Tris send questions here. One of the questions is, are all CTP-funded PIs eligible to apply for the rapid response projects that will be funded through the new Opportunity Fund, or is this a TCORS only program? This is the Opportunity Fund would be open to all CTP-funded investigators. In fact, I think any investigator who's poised to do the research within the time frame requested, that in part is the idea is that we wanted this open to investigators who are well poised and positioned to do the research. The next question is, what is the minimum number of people that are expected to be able to do the activities requested? There is no minimum number. I mean, it's really just proposing the qualified staff to who can get the work done that's required in the RFA. So, I mean, that's going to vary from applicant to applicant. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions, but I'll wait another minute or two in case you haven't had a chance to type your question in. So let me see. Okay, well, I guess we were good at explaining everything since there don't seem to be any more questions. So I think that is going to conclude the webinar. Again, you're encouraged to contact NIH staff for any further clarification that you may need and to get any feedback on how you're going to approach your application. So thank you for joining.